This week on Indie Miners, we ask ourselves, what does Leonardo DiCaprio's Girlfriends and the classic Pumpkins album Adore have in common? They both peak at age 25. Today, a deep dive into the album Adore.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Indie Miners. Ben and Al with you here, and today we're going to be looking at the Smashing Pumpkins' fourth album, Adore. And ask the question, has it been actually misunderstood after all of these years? Good afternoon to you, Al. We've got a lot to talk about here, haven't we?
Oh, mate, very much looking forward to getting into an album that was released when I was 17 and have a bit of a chat about what we thought about the album at the time compared to nearly 25 years on, mate. Good to see you.
Great to see you. So, from a rundown perspective, around about 1996, 97, I mean, this is really where the Pumpkins were at the peak of their powers. They just released Melancholy, double album, 2 hours. It had almost as many songs that were offcuts of B-sides, so just a lot of material that was going through at that stage. You then had Jimmy Chamberlain, the drummer, who was sacked due to some drugs issues. So I think one, if I can recall, one of the side members, supporting members of the group had died of an overdose. In terms of the album itself, Billy Corgan came out and said that it was going to be more of a techno focus, so more like what you saw with the track 1979 of Melancholy, as well as the song that came out from the Batman soundtrack. And he also said it might be stripped back somewhat. So what we did end up getting was a 72-minute album worth 16 tracks, which I think is almost a double album by anyone's standards today. Having a look at some of the more detailed song analysis that's now available with Spotify and comparing the band's 4 albums, excluding the B-side album, Pisces Iscariot, I think first and foremost, you definitely see traces of, in each of the albums, Corgan's lyrical style, as well as their energy. Lightness and tempo are things that did sort of change from Gish to Siamese Dream and sort of held with regards to Adore. But Al, the two things that were different, and I think this is where people might have sort of seen the albums as to be sort of same but different, but not quite expected, if you like, was really around the instrumentation as well as acousticness. So there was a large increase in the sort of the acoustic style instruments like the acoustic guitar or piano, which surprised me given that Corgan came out at the time and said that the album was going to be much, much more of a sort of a techno type of style. So all of that is good to hear in context and just sort of compare what actually had changed with that album and maybe putting a finger on I guess why it maybe wasn't received quite so much as the other albums in terms of their catalogue. Now, let's maybe go back, Al, and let's recall what you thought of the album at the time. I'd be very interested, just before going into what we think now. Did you listen to this, or yeah, I'd love to know.
Yeah, look, you've got to remember at the time they were coming off the back of Melancholy. Billy Corgan was going through some personal challenges in his life in terms of his marriage breakup, and of course his mother passing away from cancer. So you've got a huge amount of tour pressure. So the band's just finished their Melancholy tour, worldwide tour, so they're absolutely exhausted. And Billy Corgan actually came out to say it was one of the most painful experiences of his life. I guess at the time, from my point of view as a 17-year-old fan of the Smashing Pumpkins, I was expecting the singles to be pumped out similar to Melancholy, with the same kind of sound, even though Corgan had come out to say it was going to be a techno record. That said, even as a 17-year-old, the first 3 tracks, to Sheila, Ava Adore, the lead single, and then, of course, Perfect, the second single, I absolutely loved. But it was almost like a nosedive for me at the time, heading into the next song, Daphne Descends. However, I've got to say, I did give it a few listens at the time, but really I kind of fell off the Pumpkins bandwagon for a little bit until they released Machina, which had a couple of great songs that I loved. But to me, I just think at the time, looking through the eyes of a 17-year-old, I was expecting something more. And even though Corgan at the time came out to say that he was not making an album for teenagers, this was more of a concept album aimed at not just the youth, which his previous albums kind of were. What are your thoughts, mate, looking back nearly 25 years ago?
Yeah, I cannot remember a lot about that album. So I was a card-carrying holder of the Smashing Pumpkins fan club, more or less. I listened to all 4 of their albums, including Pisces Iscariot. I absolutely loved it. I was into the B-sides. I was all over their
You were a
entire
fanboy.
catalog. I was a fanboy. I bought the Batman soundtrack CD. That was the peak of it. But I actually can't remember that particular song. That's how crazy it is. And I think how far I sort of dropped off the Smashing Pumpkins at around about that time and around about the time of Adore. But I think the signals I was getting is that the single or the single over Adore and Perfect were very similar to 1979. Corgan came out and said, this is what the album's going to be about. It kind of scared me away because that wasn't really my bag at the time. I think once you introduced an electronic keyboard, back in the day, I was running away very quickly. So I think I just sort of mean that I was actually listening to this album almost as a first time listen, because I mean, apart from the singles, I had no idea what was actually part of the album itself. So I guess having gone through that, listening to it now, what's your view now? Like, I guess after all these years, it's been 24 years, right?
Well, mate, as I said at the start, in terms of what does the album Adore have in with Leonardo DiCaprio's ladies in his life, I think really both have peaked at 25 years of age, and next year is, of course, the 25-year anniversary of Adore. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Pumpkins do there in terms of a possible reissue or a remastering. Of course, he did re-release it in 2014 with a mono version, which is you can hear on Spotify. But listening to it now, mate, as a 41-year-old, I really, really enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed the later half of the album, which has some pretty emotional kind of songs on it. The 8-minute epic song For Martha, which is, of course, dedicated to Corgan's late mother who passed away from cancer, is pretty powerful. And hearing both Corgan and Darcy's vocals on the track, it's really emotional. And for those of us who have gone through, people in our lives who have passed on and passed on through cancer, it really does kind of, I don't know, can make you shed a tear kind of thing. And I just really think, my wondering is, mate, that if Corgan had written the song Stand Inside Your Love, which was written 2 years later, slotted this into the album Adore, I just think it could have been an absolute belter of an album. But listening to it now, I just think it's an absolute cracker and really, really enjoyable 25 years on, mate. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think my question is, once it gets to 26 years old on the Leonardo scale, does it become past its use-by date? So are we getting to the peak of Adore? I certainly think that you don't just fall off a cliff. Billy Corgan is obviously been a talented songwriter. He's demonstrated that over his entirety of his career, and with the singles, he's definitely shown that he was top of his game still. So Perfect and Over Adore. I think that the surprising thing for me is that it's not a techno album. When you listen to a lot of the songs, there are, as the Spotify stats have come out to show, that there's a lot of songs that are more or less using the standard instruments that we came to expect from Melancholy. There's a lot of piano stuff in a lot of the songs. So Full Martha is one example of that. I was very surprised to hear that in terms of the types of songs that were being written. But look, I do believe that I think some of the deeper cuts weren't probably quite of the standard that we were expecting of Melancholy. So I think that it was a little bit more same for me. Like I didn't think there was anything. A lot of those songs were probably not particularly memorable. And I do wonder if the album was stripped back to it, like I guess conventional length, so 35 to 40 minutes. I mean, that's probably an EP in Billy Corgan's standards. If it was cut down to that particular size, what we might actually see, you might actually get all killer and not much filler, which I think would maybe put the album in a much better light than what it was seen at the time. So I guess with all of that in mind, and just maybe as a final word, do you think it's misunderstood, mate?
Yeah, I do. I think the original idea of what Billy Corgan and the Smashing Pumpkins were trying to achieve at the time was definitely misunderstood, and that shows in the division of the fan base at the time, who were pretty much divided on what they were hoping the album was going to be and what it was. But I mean, that said, it was critically acclaimed. It averaged kind of 3.5, 4 stars. It was nominated for awards. However, I think if Corgan had his time again, and the pressures and demands of the music industry weren't as intense as they were at the time, we could have had a different outcome of the album. But mate, I think it's going to be a cult album for many years to come. It's got massive following, and I mean the title "Adore." It is an album to adore, and I think that the fans will really appreciate a 25-year anniversary in 2023. So we're looking forward to some comments and maybe some banter, either when we release this video now or in 12 months' time. So very much looking forward to that, mate.
Yeah, and look, from my perspective, I'm on the fence. I think that I could see it being misunderstood from, certainly from the signals we were getting. It's a different album to what I was expecting to hear, but I don't think it was quite at the standard of Siamese Dream or Melancholy. So it is a little bit of a 50-50 from my perspective. So that is our Indie Miners special on the Smashing Pumpkins' Adore. That wraps up another episode of Indie Miners. Please look to subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter, and let us know if there's an album you would like us to look at. So until next time, bye for now, and thank you for watching.